Whilst patch 3.24 didn't change the core of salvage gameplay per se, the changes to how cargo can be handled has changed the process of managing salvage goods, and the impact of that on the Vulture gameplay is somewhat bittersweet. I'm Forrester, and this gameplay video covers a trip out in the Vulture, salvaging some glorious panels and then selling up. Because this was a longer session, much of the footage has been sped up to keep the overall length of the video down, and those parts are clearly marked as such, but otherwise this video includes all of the relevant footage. And this is intended to be a gameplay video rather than a guide, although there is a salvage tutorial available on the channel if that's what you are hoping for. So without further ado, let's get started. And we'll immediately jump into that ×12 speed to cross the hangar, get aboard the Vulture and get into space. Ultimately there's going to be a lot of salvage this session, so I don't want to be spending those precious minutes doing the quantum travel hop. And we're going to Mike L2 for this trip, for the simple reason that it's very easy to get to from New Babbage and facing the right way for where the planet was currently pointed. We're heading to the Long Forest Station and then scanning to try and find some salvage. And immediately after arriving, we found something with an RS signature of 10,000, which is a very good sign for just arriving here. So I'm following the usual methodology for scanning for panels, which is have a scan at a very low piercing to find out what you're looking for, check something of the appropriate value, which is usually something that divides by 2000, and then increasing the piercing to try and get the little pips to say this is exactly where we need to go. And then as I'm getting closer and closer and closer, reducing the speed and giving a moment for those panels to spawn in. This does feel a lot smoother to do in a Vulture versus a Reclaimer. With that said, I think I'm going to have to keep creeping forward until I can see where these panels spawn in. So RS value of 10,000 is indicative that there could be 5 panels here, and there's the first one spawned in. Nice big panel, that's exactly what we want to see. And so immediately start salvaging that. Those that are familiar with my Vulture Vulture salvage videos will know I've got a fairly standard loadout that I like to have. It's the beautiful icebreaker paint, which we'll see more of later, and for the actual salvage I've got 2 abrade scraper modules. I've swapped the tractor beam to the first slot along with a cinch, so I'm double abrading this thing. And I've been keeping an eye out on the vehicles surrounding me whilst I'm salvaging away. You can see it on the top right in the heads-up display. The advocacy came just to give me a quick scan, and to avoid any possibility of getting into trouble when I'm at my salvage panels, I just stopped what I was doing. They scanned away, and then they'll be on their merry way again in their Cutlass Black. Whenever I'm out and about salvaging, I'm always very suspicious of seeing other ships and other vehicles. Here you go, you can see the advocacy trails there, and that beautiful icebreaker livery. I have this for my Vulture and my Prospector, and I have to say it is one of my absolute favourites. Right, back to salvaging, paying attention again. So this part of the salvage experience is pretty much exactly the same in patch 3.24 as patch 3.23. Your panel finding, the actual art of the salvage itself is identical, so it really hasn't changed this part of salvaging. I think one of the things that you could argue has changed slightly is that more people are doing cargo hauling right now, so there's less competition perhaps on your server, so it might be easier to find panels, but the actual salvage gameplay at the core of it is the same. And it's a pretty good session when you can immediately arrive at your destination and stumble across 5 salvage panels. I can think of worse ways to be. So we'll zoom back up to ×12 speed. I think if you've seen a bit of panel salvaging, you've probably seen the lot. And it's a lot more satisfying in ×12 speed watching that panel get hoovered up. As an empty vulture, don't really have to worry about being too full from one panel, and then I'll blast it away when I'm done and move on to the next. But as I start to get onto the second and third panels, I'll be thinking about just watching that complete cargo storage on the bottom right, not letting the hopper get too full. There we go, 13 SCUs. So we'll come down and unload. And once again, this part of the salvage gameplay loop is unchanged. Managing cargo internally on the Vulture is exactly the same. There's the cargo grids, which will fit, I think 12 SCUs. I'm trying to do the quick maths here. Yeah, I think it's 3 by 2 by 2, so that's 12. But then you've also got the walkway that you can fit some more. And then you've got the hopper as well that you can store up to 13 SCU on board without ejecting it. So I would say somewhere in the region of 30 to 36 SCUs you could probably get aboard a Vulture. Some people are braver than others. I'm probably a little bit more conservative in that regard. But this part is unchanged from the previous patches. It's just managing the boxes internally. But again, in the interests of completeness, this is some box juggling gameplay with the Drake Vulture. The hopper holds 13 SCUs in it, so by this panel I've completely filled that hopper, and so emptying out these 13 and just getting them all organised at the back of the ship, I'll be able to do another run where I eject boxes, and then I'll also be able to do another run after that where I just fill up the hopper again. So that's the broad plan. The other advantage of doing only panels is that you don't have any construction materials messing up your numbers. So you know, for example, that if you are full to the brim of 13 SCUs on the hopper, that is all 13 SCUs, you know exactly what you're getting. Whereas if you had 0.2 of construction materials, say, then you're only getting 12 SCUs of the rest of the RMC. And the RMC is still very valuable in this patch. I think I explained that. Hopefully it makes sense. You can let me know in the comments if I was just rambling. So the only minor difference really for this patch is that the cargo grid seems to hover over as blue now when you're in the right place. I think it used to be purple, but it seems like a minor change. So there I've got 8 SCUs on the grid, 2 SCUs on the corridor, so I've got room for a little bit more out on the left hand side. There we go. Who needs to use the walkway, eh? And this is box 12. So they're fairly neatly stacked, perhaps. He says as the box jumps out at him. There we are. And then the 13th box has just come out, so we'll put that just on the grid and then back up for some more salvage. So we'll ×12 speed this thing again and get some more glorious salvage done. It does look very smooth in ×12 speed. So one of the things that sometimes comes up when people see my videos in the comments on salvage in particular is why I'm moving the ship instead of just moving the gimbals on the salvage beams. So the salvage heads do come equipped with gimbals. I have a peculiarity with my control setup. I think it's either the Tobii eye tracker or the controller that I use to get nice smooth panning shots. It's something in the way that I'm set up that means that the gimbal doesn't work properly for me. That's to do with my configuration, and I'm loath to change it because I've got that configuration so that I can get decent-ish YouTube footage. So I'm quite happy just to use kind of the fixed beams and move the ship rather than moving the gimbal heads. It makes very little difference to me, and it means that I can keep my configuration as it is so that I can continue to record some YouTube footage for all you fine folks watching in the audience. So in case you were wondering, that's why I'm not in gimbal mode. Sometimes, we might see this later in the video, the salvage heads get slightly misaligned, they go almost a little bit cross-eyed, and I will switch to gimbaled and back to fixed immediately after that just to reset them, but that's the only time. And here we are, we've got a full cargo bay, a full hopper, and so we'll land back in the small hangar right at the station. And this is what is different in patch 3.24. So in previous patches, you filled up your Vulture, and that was it, you were full, you had to go up and sell. What you can do slightly differently now is offload that cargo and store it somewhere else should you wish to. Now there's still an advantage to going and selling at your destination where you're actually going to sell those goods, because then you're not double moving. But if you wanted to get straight back out and salvage, then you can just offload to the freight elevators at the station here, and then it's straight back out. So what that means is that you compartmentalize your gameplay a little bit more. If you're just wanting to do the salvage session, you come in, you dump the boxes, and you get straight back to salvage, and then you can do the moving and the selling later, depending on how many SCUs and how much patience that you've got. And so what you'll see now is just unloading all of these boxes off the back of the Vulture, putting them on the freight elevator, and then we'll be able to store them at this location. Now in hindsight, I probably could have parked a little bit further back here. I think inevitably the more you do this, the more you'll learn exactly where to park. I'm not used to unloading in a small hangar, usually it gives me a large or a very large, so I feel very fortunate to have been given this small hangar. So this can get very tedious moving the boxes around, and that's why this is bittersweet gameplay, because actually the process of just dumping these boxes on the freight grid and getting back out and salvage means that in an individual session you can spend more time salvaging, but in the round, in the aggregate, if you are not unloading where you're going to be eventually selling up, this can take a lot longer because you're unloading every single box one by one, and ultimately I'm not going to be able to sell this RMC here. So I'm going to have to move it somewhere else, which is going to involve loading it up again and maybe even unloading it at the other side. And so I don't know how I feel about this. On the one hand, it feels like it takes a lot longer to get things done, which is a shame. It's frustrating. But on the other hand, I can do sessions that are more of the same type of thing. So if I'm wanting to go out and salvage, I can spend more of that play session actually salvaging versus flying in Quantum and selling and traveling on a tram and things like that. And then I can store up as much or as little RMC at these locations as I want, assuming that they survive between patches, and then I can sell it when I feel ready to. So that is going to be a gameplay session in itself, especially if you've got upwards of 100 boxes. That's going to take you a fair amount of time to be moving that around, but I can do that in a separate session. So I haven't decided how I feel about this yet. I would say it feels like a different issue to the Reclaimer, because the Reclaimer can obviously hold a lot more, can salvage a lot more, but the boxes can be bigger. The Vulture is restricted to these 1 SCU boxes, and as soon as you're talking upwards of 100 RMC, which is not unusual for a couple of hours worth of salvaging, 100 boxes to move around can get a little tedious. So I think the jury is still out for me on this one, but I'll be interested to read your thoughts in the comments, whether you appreciate this change or perhaps otherwise. Interestingly, this is one of the things that perhaps gives a little bit more power to the Vulture than previously. So for panel salvaging, the big advantage that the Reclaimer had previously was that the cargo store available was just huge in comparison to the Vulture. So the Vulture, you got limited just over 30 SCUs. You could stretch that by 1 or 2 boxes here and there, but the Vulture, you can be happily carrying hundreds. So the advantage of the Reclaimer of the Vulture was just how long you could stay in space and salvaging. And this patch somewhat changes that. You can't be salvaging, but it means you can do a quick drop off rather than a long drop off. Right, now we've got all of the stuff in the hopper, which we can empty out. And if I was just a little bit further back, I could probably do this all stood from one location. But never mind. I'm kind of making it work, I think. Now, I know as well that there'll be some people that quite like the box juggling. For me, I find it quite satisfying moving boxes around. But also there'll be people that don't like it at all. That's fine. Some people just want to salvage, some people want to move boxes. I actually don't mind the moving boxes, as long as they end up in the right place. I do get quite strict about having the boxes looking neat after I've been moving them around. Maybe that's telling me something about myself, I don't know. So at this point I've been showing quite a long stint of box moving. That is intentional, so don't worry, as we get later in the video I will start speeding this stuff up. But I did want to show this can get tedious. And as much as I do enjoy moving my boxes around, for some people this will be not very fun. I almost filled up the base layer of this freight elevator. Gonna have to put the last few boxes onto a second level. And you can, to some extent, organise these boxes how you want, right? So I quite like using one level and then almost creating a frame so that I can just push the boxes against other boxes and they end up in the right place. It makes it a bit easier for me if I'm just throwing boxes around to be able to say, you know, go aggressively and slam it into the other boxes and then it'll be on the grid. You can stack high if you want to. One of the things that I would love is being able to combine these boxes, because it's the 1 SCU nature of it that makes things tough. And there the hopper is empty. So we'll go and store these at the station. All I have to do is press down on the freight elevator and it will move everything across to the warehouse. There we are, 32 SCUs of RMC. And then what I'll do is I will just claim my hull A at this location so that I'm ready to move the stuff when I need to. And then it's back out into the Vulture. So I was talking about combining the boxes. There is a way that you can sort of, it's not combining the boxes, but you can get one of the bigger crates and then put the smaller crates in the bigger crates. It can cause issues. It's not a perfect solution. Speaking of perfect solutions, I've immediately found a 20,000 signature value set of panels here. So This is the advantage of panel hunting. I've barely left the station, I've found my panels, and it's going to be more than the Vulture can hold by some way, but I can just go back to the station, drop off the boxes, and then in theory come back to this location to grab the last of it. And that's the advantage in 324. So for this session, for example, I was planning to do 2 trips to get some RMC from the panels, load them up on the Hull A, and then send them back. I'm actually going to be able to string together 3 different trips because I immediately know that there's a place where I can go and grab some panels as soon as I leave the station. So that's the advantage in 324, is you can be much more responsive, be back out salvaging again without having to leave, fly somewhere completely different. You can still be in the same broad area. And obviously we're doing this at times 12 speed now. You've seen the salvaging, you've seen moving boxes, so still quite relaxing though. So I think my 324 wish list for future patches would be the ability to combine crates. Maybe you have to do it in the warehouse, right? That's fine. But say, for example, all of those 1 SCU crates that we sent down, if you could then combine them, bolt them together so that they become 8 SCU crates or 16 SCU crates, for me, that would be wonderful. That would take a lot of the pain out. And the way the crates are designed, you could probably do that, right? You wouldn't need to go wild to be able to combine them. So I'd love the facility to do that. I'd also love, and I'm very careful about how I say this because I know people love the mule, but I'd love like a bigger tractor beam forklift type truck which can just move boxes really quickly and easily. Can be a bit unwieldy sometimes, moving boxes with the multi-tool, or even the bigger max lift. So being able to buy with Alpha UEC some sort of transport vehicle or forklift truck, that would be pretty cool. Right, we're pretty much full again, so we're heading back to the hangar. This time parked a little better, and then unloading those boxes onto the grid. And there, I told you we would do times 12 speed for this one. Looks quite smooth actually in times 12. Looks like I know what I'm doing. And unloading some more crates. Emptying the hopper. And then transferring down to the warehouse, and that's up to 66 SCU of RMC. I did leave another one out, so it was actually 67. I was curious as to what would happen when you leave something out in the freight elevator, so I've left it out as a test. And now we're back to the panels, and this was my favourite part. I'd part salvaged a panel, and I left the hangar, flew exactly to the right place, and found the panel that I'd part salvaged. I can't describe how pleased with myself I felt for being able to actually find the same panel that I've been out looking for after just going and dropping off cargo. That for me was the big change in 324, was if I'd gone somewhere else, the chances of me finding this group of panels again, I would say, are slim. But because I was in the same place, I could remember, I've got a reasonable sense of direction, I could remember roughly where it was that I needed to go, fly out, find the panels, and the first panel that I found was the one that I'd left a little bit of salvage on. It was a great feeling, really, really great. And so for the pure salvage side of things, if all that you like doing, if you put aside the value of the RMC and the selling of the crates and things like that, if what you like doing is the actual salvage itself, I think this patch is great for that. The challenge is the selling part. If you're like disintegrating panels like this, like I do. And I'm still blasting them away when I've finished. I'm told it helps to make sure that the panels despawn and that they don't show up. I don't know if that's true, but I'm one of those things that if somebody tells me it's good manners to do something, I'm more likely to do it. I want to be a good citizen. And I found another panel group here just on the way back to the station. Move some more boxes. So when you take out the times 12 nature of this speeded up footage, it's about 2 hours that I was out salvaging, and that includes the time from leaving New Babbage to getting here and all of the time moving boxes around in the station. So about 2 hours for 3 sets of panels that have kind of, or more than 3 sets of panels, 3 trips out to salvage panels that have kind of fully filled up the Vulture. So filled up the Vulture 3 times in that amount of time. You can see here what I was talking about earlier about how sometimes the heads get misaligned slightly, and so by switching on and switching off into gimbal mode, you realign them. And there you are, nice external view of the beautiful icebreaker Vulture coming in to the Lagrange station. So this is a 3rd trip to the hangar. Each trip is just over 30 SCUs, so in the end result here is from those salvage trips out grabbing panels, it's over 100 SCUs of RMC, which is about 1.5 million Alpha UEC worth. So it's not a terrible haul. Again, I'm always wary of saying that's not bad or that's great or that's good, because everybody has their own view of what they think a good amount of Alpha UEC per hour to earn is. For me, if I'm having fun, it's a good amount of Alpha UEC. And then I spent about 300 Alpha UEC on fuel. So far so good. The next stage now is I actually need to transport the stuff to sell it. Now I have spawned in the Hull A. I mentioned earlier that I brought the Hull A in because I was planning to do 2 trips. And 2 trips of just over 30 SCU aligns very neatly to the Hull A's 64 SCU of cargo capacity. And also the Hull A is very easy to load because all of the cargo storage is on the outside of the ship. So you can just do what I've done here and park the ship next to the freight elevator and then just throw the boxes on one at a time. You don't need to move, you don't need to jump aboard the ship. It's very, very easy to load. It's one of the advantages of the Hull A. But obviously, this doesn't transport all of the material in one go. So I could have chosen a better cargo hauler that would do that, maybe the Constellation Taurus. But I've chosen, I'd spawned the Hull A in here. I knew I wanted to fly around the Hull A. I've been trying to fly it a bit more recently. So you see me here loading up the cargo onto the Hull A. I'm aware that I've left about 1/3 of the cargo here, but don't worry, I salvage all of the time. It will get picked up at some point. And then flipping around the Hull A to load up the rest of the cargo. Now this is the bit that takes a little bit longer. So loading up this 64 SCU onto the Hull A took about 10 minutes. It doesn't sound awful. It's not awful, it's 10 minutes. But when you add in the flight time on the other side, when you add in the unloading on the other side, which is another 10 minutes or so, it does add to the length of the gameplay session. So this is why I feel that Vulture is bittersweet, because you can be very quick at going from salvaging straight back to salvaging, but then you get this at the end of it, which is the trade-off. Whereas if you just went and sold straight away, yes, you'd be not salvaging for a bit, but you wouldn't have as much box moving to deal with, I guess is the point. Still, nice view there of the Hull A as it comes into land. And then we'll ask for the landing bay. Now, New Babbage is my home, so of course they give me the extra large, ridiculously large landing pad, as they would do. Now, the first thing here is this is something that you build knowledge and experience with. Because I had everything on the cargo grid on the hull A, I thought, well, let's just go and sell straight from the cargo grid and see if they'll unload it for me, right? I don't mind paying a few alpha UEC if I'm going to sell it there anyway. It's the same console that I'm going to sell to, so can you just unload it for me? So, selecting the hull A from the list, I've got 64 individually hand-loaded crates worth 921k. I could pay 3,000 alpha UEC to automatically unload that. Yes, please. Cargo removal failed. Great. Try again. Selecting them individually. Cargo removal failed. So that's disappointing. That could have saved a little bit of time. I'm now going to have to go all the way back the depressing tram journey of shame as I realise I'm going to have to unload all of these boxes again, one by one. I think this is a hull A type issue. Because of the way when you store the ship, sometimes the arms kind of retract in but stay extended. I don't really know how to explain it, but I'll show you it in a moment. The hull A has this weird thing where the spindles extend and that exposes the cargo grid. Sometimes when you store it, the spindles half contract, so they're not fully extended, and I think that causes issues with the auto load and unload. I've not had this issue with some of the other ships when I auto load, but I like to show the warts and all gameplay of not just everything going smoothly, so I thought I'd include this in the video to say, actually it would have been great if it works just to automatically sell. And you can see kind of in the ×12 footage the cargo spindles are half retracted, and that's I think what causes the issue with the auto unloading of the ship. It's frustrating, but it's not game breaking in that I can still unload these crates manually. It just takes a little bit longer to do that. It's another 10 minutes. Now for this part you can see what I was talking about where I organise the cargo grid. I almost create bumpers out of the cargo boxes, and then I can just fling the rest of the cargo into the bumpers. They'll automatically stop because physics, and then I can store them on the cargo grid at the point at which they stop. So as a reminder, this is about 2/3 of the salvage in a single hop. I'll send it down on the freight elevator to store it planet side in the warehouse. 64 SEUs of RMC. Just check that it's safely stored. Seems to be. So rather than show you the tram journey again, I've just done some editing magic here to show you me moving to sell up. The cargo is now stored at New Babbage, 64 SEUs, max out, sell, no loading time. So there we go. That's the 900 odd alpha UEC. 900k alpha UEC, I should say. If you enjoyed this video, you might press the like button to let me know I should make more similar videos, and if you're not yet subscribed, given that you got this far, you might want to do that too, so that YouTube will know to show you more videos like this in future. But otherwise, and as always, thank you for watching.